KUCR, University of California. We're here at NAMM 2026. This is the 125th edition of the NAMM show, and this is an organization that displays, advances innovation, and launches a lot of products. What is the history of Martin Guitars and then Martin with the NAMM show? And by the way, we're speaking with Brenden Hacket of Martin Guitars. Let's bring us from the beginning to today.
Beginning to end. So it's a
Sure
really interesting and long history. It's great to be a part of NAMM, which also has a long history.
Sure
and being with the company for 26 years, I've really been able to immerse myself in a lot of that, spending time in the museum and also with Chris Martin himself. The company started in the U.S.
Who we interviewed a number of
So his family, his ancestors moved over to the U.S. in 1833. They came out of an area called Markneukirchen, which is just to the west of Germany, I believe, if I'm getting that right. But you can look it up. Markneukirchen to New York City. And New York City in 1833, as you can imagine, was nothing like it was today. So the infrastructure wasn't there. The roads are dirt. There's no sewer system. Very different place. So they come from these rolling hills in Markneukirchen, outside of Germany, and they come into New York City. It wasn't very favorable for the family. So it was enough to establish the business, but they weren't very happy there. So we actually have documentation, letters from C.F. Martin's wife, Ottilie, writing back home saying, not really happy here, maybe we'll come back to Markneukirchen. Now, the Martin family had been preceded in the U.S. by the Schott family. And the Schotts and the Martins had apprenticed together in a shop in Vienna, so they knew each other. Mrs. Martin was also writing to Mrs. Schott, who was in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. And Mrs. Schott was saying, well, don't go home. I'd love to have you come down here and visit. So they probably came down on a horse and carriage and discovered that the countryside in Pennsylvania was very similar to home. And there were German-speaking people already settled there. So it really just made perfect sense for them to come to Nazareth. The other thing about Nazareth quickly is that there was a history of instrument building already established by the Moravian church and builders there. So they were building pianos and other instruments in Nazareth. So if I'm going to make a business change, I want to be somewhere comfortable, but I also want to know that I have a workforce and some experience that's going to help guide me into the next generation.
So they began building guitars exactly when?
The exact date I forget offhand, but he was apprenticing in the late 1700s. And started building guitars in Vienna and then back in Markneukirchen. The story in Markneukirchen is complicated because there were guilds back then, and there was a cabinet makers guild and a violin guild. And the guitar was still relatively new. We see guitars back into the 1600s, but by 1796, that era, the guitar is still new, and it's the violin makers are kind of thumbing their nose at this guitar thing. It's just a fad. And they would not accept him into the guilds, and that's part of the reason why he came to New York.
It's interesting you talk about violin and guitar juxtaposed, because I think a lot of people would say, as a guitar, this is the Stradivarius. This has that kind of standing in the guitar world. And how does that happen? How does someone achieve, or a company achieve, the level that Martin has achieved? And I know it's got to be the craft evolved and handed down over generations, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a number of things, and I think the influence from other building communities like the violin community, and having had Stradivarius precede that, and all the great Italian builders as well, there was a lot of expertise coming into early guitar building. And because it was a newer instrument, there was a lot of room for design modification and new ideas to come forth. So the bracing of a guitar and the size and the shape of a guitar were evolutionizing before people's eyes around that time period. The early guitars that CF was building were copies of Stauffer style instruments, and that's who he apprenticed with. So they were kind of these little kidney bean guitars. They're called parlor guitars. and they had a different headstock. And interestingly, we talk about the violin thing more, the headstock on early guitars looked like the side profile of a violin scroll.
Ah, so that's where that comes from.
Definitely some influence there.
You know, we call what we do in coming here, we want to learn about and get the information out about creative technology. So this is a technology by which you express yourself musically and you connect to it. And people sometimes say, well, what are you talking about guitars for in this context? But the guitars were the technology. It was and it's still, if you think about what it takes to make a guitar, the expertise on the wood, knowing how to select the wood, the craftsmanship in assembling the guitar, the metal that's used in the guitar, the tuning system, the resonance of it, the beauty of it. This is something I think that the musician David Crosby once touched on. It says, when you're learning how to play guitar, and these aren't typically thought of as beginners instruments, they're master instruments, but you want to get the best guitar you can because you want its sonic character, its music character quality to draw you in. So you get lost in the instrument and you play and you practice for hours and hours. And this is a phenomenon I have seen exactly with Martin guitar owners. Mm-hmm. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really important thing, and part of what David Crosby is talking about is he immersed himself in great instruments. Fortunately, maybe they were a little bit less expensive at the beginning of his career, and I think some were probably given to him by friends and other musicians. But you have a level of responsibility at that level to be putting forth your best in how you sound and project yourself and the material that you're writing. And the guitar all contributes to that, right? David Crosby has a unique voice that can only be his voice, but the guitar voice he selected, he had the opportunity to select that. He didn't choose his own voice, but he chose a guitar that coupled with his voice and what the rest of the band was doing and just did incredible things. You know, one thing I think that people don't, as you're saying, people don't necessarily understand the connection between the two, but I think a lot of people make the mistake of just getting a guitar, and there's all sorts of great instruments out there. They're all represented here at NAMM, but some instruments are produced in larger quantities, and they're not necessarily set up as well. You can always get a guitar set up, but the advantage to a Martin guitar is that whether you buy a $5,000 guitar or a $500 guitar, and we have both of those options, you're getting the same expertise, the same history, the craftsmanship is going into all of those products. And it's really important to get an instrument that suits your voice, and I use that term loosely, but your actual physical voice, and then also the voice that you're trying to express in your writing.
That's exactly what I was thinking about as you were speaking, that what the Martin guitar allows you to do, it's an instrument. And what is an instrument for? It's an instrument for bringing out what is within you. It's almost a spiritual thing I've seen in terms of people who own Martins and how they talk about that ownership. That's the instrument by which I became a musician, or I express myself, or I create on, or I discover things that I have never heard before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important. I'm full disclosure, I'm a bass player. I do play guitar, but whatever instrument it is, it's kind of the same thing. You have certain things will speak to you, and they can speak to you differently at different times, right? The guitar that you have may not be the guitar that you use currently. And a lot of people ask, well, why do you have so many guitars? Believe it or not, they're really, really different. So finding that voice that fits what you're doing is super important. And it's really good to get out into a store and play a bunch of guitars and understand what that feels like, rather than just go for an aesthetic, picking something that actually works with you.
As a person on the inside of Martin guitar, are you conscious of, like, we have to maintain this standard because this is, for a lot of people, the standard of the world?
Absolutely, and I can speak to that from personal experience, but I managed the QA department for a while and was responsible for quality and also writing training instructions and making sure the knowledge from 100 years ago is passed on to the future generation. But even before I was in quality assurance, I started in sales, and that messaging was strong, right? There's a responsibility. I think each of us, maybe a little bit more so when you're out on the road or at a trade show, but everybody in that company, in Martin Guitar, is a gatekeeper for the brand and the longevity. So whether you're placing an order or you're stringing a guitar, you're inspecting a guitar, you're cutting the wood, all of those things, the quality mindset is very strong at Martin Guitar.
Well, Martin is a company that continues to have a tradition and continues to evolve, so we'd like to have a look at some of your new products.
The new products are...
just let me stop it for a moment. Yeah. Are you telling me you're running out of power or something?
He said 10 minutes. We're at 11.
Oh, I see where you were going. Okay. All right, so we're going to get back into this. So back into answering the question you were answering. Go ahead.
Okay, ask that question again.
Sorry. Okay.
Oh, new technology.
Yeah, I'll ask it again.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. So Martin continues to evolve, maintaining the standards, the high standards that have been established over centuries, and but also evolving and creating new products as well, incorporating tradition, but involving some new elements. Curious about those.
Yeah. So the guitar itself essentially is the same instrument that was designed. We're building difference a little bit differently than we were in 1833. Some of those ideas are still there, but guitars got bigger because they had to, right? Before pickups and amplification, all of that stuff. So guitars got bigger. The guitar that we know today has been around for a long time. The D18, the D28, they're now 100 plus years old. So when you're looking at the new versions of those models or a new line comes out, you're pulling from all of that tradition first. It has to start there because it has to start with tone and it has to be a Martin. However, there's opportunities to do new things or do things in slightly different ways. So good examples of that would be the Inception series, which came out last year. The Inceptions are all North American hardwoods, and so they're not the traditional tone woods that we're all used to, but we were able to do some things with technology and the bracing to help bring out more sound out of those guitars. The SC guitar that came out a couple of years ago, totally different design, still brings from the tradition of Martin sound, building and craftsmanship, but it has some new features on it. So we're always been a company that's been willing to stretch out. One of the challenges, though, is that when you're a traditional company, the market, the world is not always receptive to you doing something different. So we've done things that are incredible that people have never even seen, just because it would probably freak people out, right?
I'm interested, maybe we could take one new guitar as an example of what you're talking about and let the audience see, because they're going to want to see you with a guitar. Mm-hmm.
So new in a guitar is, we're focused on the new Road series, which we have here today, and there's 2 different versions of those. So a lot of what is new is coming up with new woods and ways to use wood.
As you discussed with the non-standard tone woods.
Right, non-standard tone woods. The challenge with the traditional tone woods is availability and cost. A lot of them are on endangered lists. The reality is that we use this much wood compared to the rest of the wood world, but we want to be very responsible with what we do. And part of that responsibility is always looking at a new wood or a new material to see if it's viable for tone. So this year we're introducing walnut. Right? We all know walnut, but we don't really know it as a guitar wood. And walnut is a wonderful alternative to either mahogany or rosewood. It kind of sits in the middle with cherry. And we also put another wood in the Road Series line called Granadillo. And Granadillo exists in the band instrument world with oboes and woodwind instruments. So people in that world know it, but they don't know it yet in the guitar world. So we constantly have to be looking at new things to make sure that this almost 200-year-old company is going to be a 300-year-old company.
I'm pretty sure it will be. So, would it be possible to just have you show us a guitar?
Look at those? Yeah,
Yeah.
we can do that. So right now we're looking at the back of a 0012E Retro. This is a Sapelli guitar, and these are very affordable guitars that mimic our standard line instruments for a long time. The Sapelli and other tone woods become more difficult to get as we move forward. So as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at walnut, which is a very viable wood for guitars and tone.
It's certainly beautiful.
It's a beautiful wood. It comes in many different flavors. There's English walnut, there's Clara walnut. Just a beautiful wood. I think it's really going to come along nicely in the guitar world. And then we'll swing over here and we'll take a look at the Granadillo. Here's the Granadillo, a little bit lighter in color, but has similar flavor to the walnut. And overall, tonally, this is getting a little bit closer to the rosewood sound that we want to get out of these instruments to mimic what we're doing in the standard series. So both great tone woods. Yeah, they'll take a little time for everybody to get used to, but they're great off the bat. These still sound like Martin guitars, and it really helps with the future and sustainability.
Okay, we're definitely going to check these out. Brenden Hacket, I really want to thank you for taking the time. We wanted a history, we wanted a deep discussion, and you delivered in absolute fullness.
We could do 6 hours on this, but hopefully we
Don't
captured a little
tempt
bit
me.
in a couple minutes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much,
right,
sir.
appreciate it.
Thank you. We're here at NAMM 2026, 125th year of NAMM. It's KUCR, University of California, Creative Technology.